Imagine being thrown out of the only place you call home with no hope and no one to turn to. That was Janet's reality until she met a very wealthy man who changed everything. Janet had known suffering all her life, an orphan since she was 5. She grew up in the hands of distant relatives who only kept her around as an unpaid servant. When she turned 16, she was sent to work as a maid for a wealthy family, the Adebayos, where she hoped to find some stability. But what she got was worse than anything she had experienced before. Mrs. Adebayo, the madam of the house, treated her like filth. The woman's 2 daughters, Anita and Fola, were no better. They made Janet do all the house chores, from scrubbing floors to washing mountains of laundry, yet never allowed to eat the same food as them. Sometimes they even locked the kitchen, forcing her to survive on leftovers. The humiliation didn't stop there. Whenever visitors come around, Janet was hidden away like a shameful secret, and if anything went missing in the house, she was the first suspect. The house driver and security guards who saw her struggles only laughed. They say, "That's a maid's life, accept it." Outside the house, things weren't any better. The neighborhood children mocked her tattered clothes, and shopkeepers eyed her with suspicion as if expecting her to steal. But through all this, Janet remained humble and hardworking, hoping that one day things would get better. But fate had other plans. One fateful evening, Mrs. Adebayo accused Janet of stealing a gold bracelet, one Janet had never seen before. Without giving her a chance to explain, she was slapped, dragged to the gate and thrown out like trash. "You ungrateful wretch, after all I've done for you, get out and don't ever show your face here again." Janet pleaded, but the gate slammed shut behind her. Alone and with no place to go, she wandered the streets, her stomach empty, her heart heavier than ever. Days turned into weeks. She begged for food, slept in market stalls, and did odd jobs just to survive. Every night, she cried herself to sleep, wondering if she was cursed to suffer forever. Then one evening, as she sat by the roadside, exhausted and hopeless, a black luxury car pulled up beside her. The tinted window rolled down, revealing a well-dressed man in his 40s. His eyes filled with curiosity and concern. "Young lady, why are you sitting here all alone?" Janet hesitated before answering. What difference would it make? No one had ever cared before, but little did she know the meeting would change her life forever. The man studied Janet for a moment, his sharp eyes scanning her tattered clothes, the dirt on her face and the exhaustion in her eyes. Something about her reminded him of a past he rarely spoke about. "Young lady, why are you sitting here all alone?" Janet hesitated before answering. Would he even believe her? Would he mock her like the others? But she had nothing left to lose. "I have nowhere to go," she said softly, looking down at the ground. "I used to work as a maid, but they threw me out. I've been trying to survive on the streets ever since." The man didn't say anything at first. He simply sighed, then stepped out of the car. Janet flinched as he approached, expecting insults or worse, but instead he reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp wad of cash. "Take this," he said. "Get yourself something to eat and meet me here tomorrow at noon." Janet's eyes widened. No one had ever shown her such kindness before. She took the money with shaky hands, still wondering if this was real. The man got back into his car and drove off, leaving Janet in a mix of gratitude and confusion. That night, for the first time in weeks, she ate a proper meal. The food vendor even gave her an extra portion. When she saw the hunger in Janet's eyes, she found a place to sleep inside an abandoned shop, covering herself with torn sacks to keep warm. The next day, she arrived at the meeting spot before noon, afraid that if she was late, the man would change his mind. Right on time, the black luxury car pulled up again. This time, the man stepped out and gestured for her to get in. "Come, there's something I want to show you." Janet hesitated, getting into a stranger's car. She had heard too many stories about young girls being kidnapped or worse, but something about the man's calm demeanor told her he wasn't like the others. Still, she was cautious. "Where are we going?" she asked. "To my home," he said simply. "I want to help you, but first, you need to trust me." Janet swallowed hard. Her whole life, trusting people had only led to pain, but right now, she had no other options. Taking a deep breath, she opened the car door and stepped inside. Little did she know, this ride would be the beginning of a life she never could have imagined. As the car glided smoothly through the city, Janet's heart pounded. She stole glances at the man beside her, still unsure whether she had made the right decision. "Sir, why are you helping me?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man, who had been staring at the window deep in thought, turned to her and smiled. "Because I know what it means to suffer," he said simply. Janet's eyes widened. A man like him, dressed in tailored suit, wearing a watch that probably cost more than anything else she had ever owned, knew suffering? She found that hard to believe. But before she could ask more questions, the car slowed down and stopped in front of a towering mansion. The golden gate swung open, revealing a breathtaking compound with neatly trimmed lawns, a sparkling fountain, and several expensive cars parked in the driveway. Janet's mouth fell open. "This is your house?" she gasped. The man chuckled. "Yes, and from today, it is your home too." Janet's leg trembled as she stepped out of the car. Home? This place was nothing like the Adebayo's house, where she had lived as a servant. This was paradise. Before she could fully process what was happening, a tall woman in a maid's uniform rushed out to greet them. "Welcome back, sir," she said with a warm smile before turning to Janet. "And you must be the young lady Mr. Williams told us about." Mr. Williams, so that was his name. Janet was still in shock. As they led her inside, the house was even more luxurious than she had imagined. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, paintings that looked too expensive to touch. She was afraid to move, worried she might break something. They led her to a guest house. No, a suite, bigger than the entire quarter she had stayed at the Adebayo house. The bed looked softer than anything she had ever slept on, and there was even a bathroom attached with gold-plated faucets. "You can rest here," Mr. Williams said. "Tomorrow we'll talk about what comes next." Janet nodded slowly, still too overwhelmed to speak. As the door closed behind him, she sat on the bed and clutched the soft pillow, her mind racing. Was this really happening? Was she finally safe? Or was this another dream that would soon turn into a nightmare? Little did she know, her life was about to change in ways she never expected. That night, Janet barely slept. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, still afraid that this was a cruel joke, that someone would burst in any moment and drag her back to the street. But morning came, and no one did. Instead, a soft knock on the door startled her. "Miss Janet, breakfast is ready," the maid from yesterday called. Janet hesitated before stepping out, still feeling out of place in such a grand house. When she reached the dining room, she found Mr. Williams seated at a long table, sipping coffee. The spread before him was something she had only seen in movies. Fresh fruits, golden brown pastries, eggs, sausages, and a jug of fresh juice. "Sit," he said, motioning to the seat across from him. Janet sat stiffly, unsure if she was allowed to touch anything. Seeing her hesitation, Mr. Williams chuckled. "You don't have to be scared, Janet. No one will mistreat you here." That was all the reassurance she needed. She ate carefully at first, but as soon as she tasted the food, her hunger took over. For the first time in weeks, she felt warmth in her stomach. When she finished, Mr. Williams leaned back and studied her. "I know you have many questions," he said. Janet nodded. "Why are you doing this for me? You don't even know me." He sighed, looking thoughtful. "You remind me of someone, my mother. She was just like you, an orphan who worked as a maid for a rich family that treated her badly. But unlike you, no one helped her. She suffered her whole life. I always told myself that if I ever made it in life, I would help someone like her. And here you are." Janet stared at him, overwhelmed by his words. "So what happens now?" she asked. "That depends on you," he said. "I can offer you a fresh start, a place to stay, an education, and a chance to build a better future. But you must be willing to work for it." Tears welled up in Janet's eyes. No one had ever given her a choice before. She had always been at the mercy of others. But now, someone was offering her a future. "I'm willing," she whispered, and so a new life began. Mr. Williams enrolled her in school, provided her with everything she needed, and treated her with kindness she had never known. At first, it was hard for Janet to adjust. She struggled with self-doubt and fear that everything would be taken away. But over time, she gained confidence. Years passed, and Janet transformed into a strong, educated young woman. She graduated with honors, and with Mr. Williams' support, she started her own business, a foundation that helped street children get an education. One day, As she stood before a group of younger fans, telling them her story, she realized something. She was no longer the helpless maid who had been thrown into the streets. She was proof that no matter how broken your past is, your future can still shine. Janet had come a long way from the scared, hungry girl who had been thrown into the streets. Under Mr. Williams' guidance, she had built a new life, one of dignity, education, and opportunity. But despite her success, one thing remained untouched: her heart. She had never known real love. One day, during a charity gala for her foundation, Janet stood confidently in a dazzling gown, thanking guests for their support. The event was a milestone for her, proof that she had truly risen above her past. That was when she saw him. A young man stood at the far end of the room, watching her with an intense gaze. He was tall, well-dressed, and carried himself with quiet confidence. But there was something familiar about him. As she finished her speech and stepped down, he approached her with a hesitant smile. "Janet, you probably don't remember me." She frowned, searching his face. Then it hit her. "Toby!" she whispered in shock. Toby had been the only person who showed her kindness when she worked as a maid. He was the Adebayo's family's driver's son, just a young mechanic trying to make ends meet. Back then, they had stolen moments together, talking under the mango tree at the back of the house. He had promised to help her escape that life someday. But fate had other plans. After she was thrown out, she never saw him again. You are here after all these years?" Janet asked, overwhelmed. Toby chuckled. "I never stopped looking for you. When I heard what happened, I was devastated. I searched the streets, but you had vanished. And now here you are, a woman who inspires thousands." Tears filled Janet's eyes. "I thought I had lost you forever." They talked for hours that night, catching up on everything they had missed. Toby had worked hard, built his own business, and was now a successful entrepreneur. But all this success meant nothing because he had never stopped thinking about her. Over the next few months, their bond grew stronger. They spent time together, laughed, and healed old wounds. But just when Janet thought she had finally found happiness, a shadow from her past returned. Anita Adebayo. The same girl who had tormented her in the Adebayo household was now standing in front of her at a high-profile event, her fake smile dripping with jealousy. "Janet, is this really you? Wow! From a housemaid to a socialite. Who would have thought?" Anita sneered. Janet smiled calmly, refusing to be rattled. "Yes, Anita, life is full of surprises, isn't it?" But Anita's eyes weren't on her. They were on Toby. "You are with him?" Anita's voice dripped with shock and irritation. Janet suddenly remembered Anita used to flirt with Toby, but he had never entertained her. She smirked, realizing what was going on. "Yes, I am. Any problem with that?" Janet asked sweetly. Anita scoffed. "Enjoy it while it lasts. You might be somebody now, but deep down, you'll always be that poor maid who slept on the kitchen floor." Janet simply smiled. "And yet here I am, standing where you never thought I would be, with a man you never deserved." Anita stomped off, furious. Toby took Janet's hand and whispered, "Don't let her ruin this moment. You are not the girl they tried to break. You are strong, beautiful, and the woman I love." Janet's heart swelled. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving, she was truly living. And for the first time, she had found love, not in wealth or status, but in the heart of the man who had always seen her worth. True love recognizes your worth, no matter your past. Your past does not define your future. Would you have given Toby a chance if you were Janet? Lessons of the story. Kindness can change a person's life forever. No one's past should define their future. When given an opportunity, work hard and make the best of it. Never lose hope, no matter how dark life seems. What did you learn from Janet's story? Please, let me hear in the comment section. And don't forget to like if you enjoyed the story. Share and subscribe so you won't miss more interesting stories.
They thrive from the village to the mountains. Tales of old unfold in the land of Africa, where